My name is Megan Hill, and I am the Senior Program Director of the Harvard Project. And I'm from the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. I came to the project in 2007, and in those 15 years, not only have I found a job that I love, because I get to work on projects that empower tribal nations and indigenous communities, including my own, but I found a family. And I think when Joe and Steve founded the Harvard Project, they instilled that into the very fiber of what we do. And it's a family that has transcended decades at this point and continues to grow. And so it's reflected again here in this room by all of you here. And so I just, I'm overwhelmed by that. And so none of this happens in a vacuum, and it doesn't happen in isolation. I thank you all for being here to commemorate this really pivotal moment in the history of Harvard University. And I would like to invite Professor Joseph Kultz to the podium. Joe, of course, is the co-founder and co-director of the Harvard Project. He is a friend and mentor to everyone in this room. So.
Thank you very much, Megan. Excuse me. Today marks an inflection point, not only for the Harvard Project, but we're hoping for all of Harvard University. When we started our work those 3.5 decades ago, Professor Cornell and I, Steve, you should raise your hand. I had you acknowledge him because I'm about to pay him a tiny bit of an insult. When we started our work 3.5 decades ago, we were intrigued by cases of economic development that had started to spring up in the mid-1980s across Indian country. And as green and as nerdy as two young Harvard faculty could be, our question was why? Why, after decades, even centuries in some cases, of dispossession, disempowerment, and economic deprivation, why were some tribes starting to get real traction in turning around not only their economic conditions, but also their social and cultural conditions? It took us a while, but finally two things became clear. First, economic development and community strengthening were not about economics. I'm a trained economist, I was in the wrong field. What they were about, economic development and community strengthening, was effective self-government, with an emphasis on that word self. Tribal self-determination through self-government has given indigenous communities the best chance of designing and landing on economic, social, cultural, and political institutions. The goal of the Harvard Project on Indigenous Governance and Development is to produce world-class teaching and research to improve indigenous public policy and leadership so indigenous people can live in societies that are more safe, free, just, and sustainably prosperous. If my dean is paying attention, he realizes I just quoted the mission statement of the Kennedy School, adding the word indigenous. No better place to be than the Kennedy School for this work. It's not for this august and powerful university with all these buildings around us to tell indigenous people what they should do or what they should think. And it is certainly not the role of this university to go back to a time in which it failed to see indigenous communities for the vibrant contemporary societies that they are today. But it is the role of a university with the resources and reach of Harvard to make available information, insights, and tools that indigenous communities and decision makers can use to craft their own self-determined, self-governed futures.
And as we come full circle through the darkest parts of the history of our relations, our elders also teach us that at some point in our journey, you will be blessed that other people from other walks of life will join you along that journey and walk by you together, because they will share, they say, the gift of the core values of our shared humanity. In education, if it is the great equalizer, makes this time, in our time, in this part of our journey, at this critical, historic moment, we are coming full circle to now institutionalize the inclusion of the first Americans in one of the greatest, among the greatest education institutions that this country knows.
As you know, the Harvard Project provides research, teaching, engagement, and advising to Native communities. The project has been a very important institution, giving voice and structure to the indigenous nation-building movement that has now spread around the world. And the project has played a key role in fostering the indigenous renaissance and supporting communities as they pursue self-governance and development.
I can think of no programs at Harvard that make me prouder, not only for what I believe this will do for Native Americans and indigenous people around the world, but for what we will all learn from this effort. And for that, I am not only deeply grateful, but I am deeply inspired.
We're gathered today to celebrate the beginning of a future of even greater impact. We are deeply grateful today to the Harvard Project's generous friends and champions for enabling us now to expand and perpetuate Harvard's work with Native nations. So to begin, the Endeavor Foundation will establish the Julie Johnson Kidd Professorship of Indigenous Governance and Development. Next, we want to acknowledge and express our deep gratitude to the Chickasaw Nation. The nation's major gift will establish the endowed Itapila program for nation-building, education, and outreach. Next, we want to acknowledge a generous personal gift from Joe Calt and Judith Gans. Their gift will establish the endowed Senior Fellowship of Indigenous Governance and Development. Finally, we are deeply honored to receive a major gift from the Shakopee Metawakaton Sioux community. The Shakopee gift will support the project's research and tribal outreach on nation building, including field research endeavors, leadership education, and documentation and dissemination of outstanding examples of tribal government performance. During this renaissance in indigenous governance, Harvard has been a leader, and the world is paying attention to this work. I think the future is full of promise, and I'm very excited to see it. And now to speak more about why